So hello everybody and welcome back to another tank guide. For today's video I've decided to take a look at a gem of a tank from the Second World War, the Matilda tanks from the United Kingdom. I will talk about both the A11 and A12 Matilda 1 and 2 respectively, as they are essentially two sides of the same coin. Both were infantry tanks developed by Vickers Armstrong by the request of the British General Staff. The fact that they are requested vehicles is indicated by the A in their designation, which counts in essentially all British armoured fighting vehicles from the Second World War. The necessity for infantry tanks came out of World War I, where the tank was first deployed as a means to assist the infantry. Late in the war, the British had drawn up humongous offensives for the year of 1919. Here, infantry, artillery, tanks and aircraft were all to be used in combined arms. But unfortunately, at least for the British strategists' sake, the war came to an abrupt end and the ideas couldn't be tested out. But it persisted and through the interwar time were further developed. By the 1930s, a doctrine had been formulated, which called for two kinds of tanks. Infantry tanks, which were to be slow and heavily armored, equipped with either anti-tank or infantry support guns to defeat enemy strongpoints, all in order to assist the infantry in breaking the enemy lines. Once this has been accomplished, the second class of tanks, the cruiser tanks, were supposed to exploit this breakthrough and cause havoc in the rear. The cruiser tanks were generally lighter and faster to accomplish this task. With the British tank split being explained, we now can take a look at our vehicles of topic. First of the Matilda 1, officially known as Tank Infantry Mark I Matilda A11. The tank was developed by Vickers Armstrong on the basis of their Vickers 6-ton design. The vehicle would weigh 11 tons, have a crew of 2, driver and a commander, and was only armed with a 7.7mm or 12.7mm Vickers machine gun. The armor was very strong and anywhere between 60 to 65mm thick, which made it almost impervious to any enemy anti-tank gun. The vehicle was powered by a Ford V8 gasoline engine, providing 70 horsepower, bringing the vehicle up to 6.5 horsepower per ton, enabling it to go a whopping 13 km per hour on road and 9 km per hour in terrain. The suspension utilized wasn't bogie suspension, where two bogies, each holding two road wheels, were mounted on a single coil spring. Two of these contraptions then would be mounted on either side of the vehicle. With the vehicle's insufficient main armament and speed of an ambitious snail, the vehicle was essentially outdated by the time it had been drawn up. This, however, did not go unnoticed by the British, and so pretty much immediately new requirements for a new design were issued. This brings us to the Matilda 2, officially known as Tank Infantry Matilda 2 A12, because the British just love to get fancy with their words. The new design weighed in at 27 tons and had a crew of 4, driver, gunner, commander and loader. The new 3-man turret enabled the crew to perform their tasks much more effectively, as none of them had to multitask. Armament consisted out of a 40mm Royal Ordnance quick-fire 2-pounder with 93 rounds. Also, a 7.62mm Vickers machine gun would be placed coaxially to the main gun. On the Mark II variant, this would be changed to a 7.92mm Bisa. Armor was increased from between 75 to 78mm on the frontal hull, 75 and 65 on the sides, and 55mm on the rear. This turret was 75mm all around. But as you can see on screen, the armor was a little bit more complicated than just simple values, and so it left quite some chances for bounces. Propulsion came in the form of an AEC diesel engine, providing 180 horsepower. This brought the power-to-weight ratio up to 13.3 horsepower per ton. But after some troubles had been experienced with the engines, they would be swapped to Leyland diesel engines from the Mark III variant onwards, and on the Mark IV they would be once again changed to a different kind of Leyland engine. Mark IIs that would be refitted with this engine were classified as Mark IIBs. Speed crept up to 24 km per hour on road and 15 km per hour off road. The vehicle's visually most striking feature, the large mud flaps on the sides, are in fact structural parts of the vehicle's suspension, which had been slightly changed from the Matilda 1. The two bogies on coil springs were still in place, but they were subsidized by another bogie per side, and rather weirdly, a single wheel low of the idler. The mud flaps would replace the return rollers, which had been removed after it had been discovered that this approach would be cheaper. After the design had been presented, the British ordered mass production, and so from 1937 to August 1943, around 2,987 vehicles were produced. But there were some problems with mass production due to the very large cast parts for the armor. Mainly because of this, not that many Matilda IIs were ready in time for World War II, and so the British Expeditionary Force, which was sent to France, was equipped with only 20 Matilda IIs and the rest was filled up with Mark Is. Their main contribution to fighting would come in the form of the Battle of Arras, where the British commander conducted a counterattack against the German breakthrough attempt, which was currently in the process of cutting them off from the rest of France. The battle highlighted both strengths and weaknesses from the designs. The Matilda I proved to be very durable, with the Germans quickly learning that their 37mm Pak-36 was utterly useless against the British tank. The inability to kill them almost caused a panic and a general withdrawal, which could have prevented the cutoff of the Allied forces in the lowlands. Unfortunately though, the British were finally stopped by some German 88mm anti-everything cannons, which proved to be the bane for many Allied tanks during the Second World War. At the end of the day, the majority of the British tanks were destroyed, and as such the battle was concluded to be in tactical loss. Though the damage had been already done, and the attack had magnified the seeds of fear in the German high command from enemy counterattacks that could cut them off, and so several days after the battle had concluded, a general halt order was given, which stopped any further offensive actions from taking place. This enabled the British to conduct Operation Dynamo, the nowadays famous evacuation from Dunkirk. After the fall of France, the Italians decided to join in on the German side. The British responded to actions taken up in Libya with Operation Compass. In this operation, a large quantity of British Matilda tanks would be used. During this operation, the Matilda earned itself an almost godlike reputation, being able to knock out any Italian tank fielded, but remained unfazed by their anti-tank fire. This outstanding performance earned the tank the nickname Queen of the Desert from her crewmen. The British assault was finally halted in El Algilas, not because the British offensive had run out of steam, but rather because a new German offensive in the Balkans maybe brought up the necessity to deploy units to the area, and so the British wanted to retain their forces here for a potential transfer. This transfer though never came. The British forces in Libya would only see action again when Rommel and the Afrika Korps arrived there. Rommel's style of maneuver warfare prompted the British tanks with some difficulty. Their slow speed made it rather hard to counter the German quick maneuvers. And so in the year of 1941 to 42, several British Matildas would be lost in the operations the Germans concluded, which ultimately would push the British forces out of Libya and into Egypt, up to El Alamein. In the duration of these battles, the Matilda still proved to be a capable tank. Some of the vehicles the Germans captured were even included in Rommel's personal combat squadron, the Casta. But it was increasingly falling short. The Germans fielded increasing number of 88s and better anti-tank guns, and they were even upgrading and upgunning their Panzer III and IVs. The Matilda was in a dire need for an upgrade, but while research was undertaken to perhaps upgun the vehicle or generally improve it, because Armstrong promised to produce the almost as capable Valentine tank at a much faster rate, because the Matilda production was still not becoming any easier, due to the, as aforementioned, large cast parts of the armor. And so with a vehicle that was just as capable, being able to be produced at a much faster rate, the fate of the Matilda had been sealed. And so the construction was ended in August of 1943. The Matilda would see continuous usage though. It proved to be very effective in the Asian theater against the Japanese tanks, which were less capable than the German ones.
What a fool you are. I'm a god. How can you kill a god? What a grand and intoxicating innocence. How could you be so naive? There is no escape. No recall or intervention can work in this place. Come, lay down your weapons. It is not too late for my mercy.
It also was heavily exported to the Soviet Union as part of the Lend-Lease program, some being upgraded with the ZIS-5 76.2mm anti-tank gun from the Russians. But in Europe and Africa, the Matilda was put in second-line combat roles, and was generally used as an engineering vehicle in a number of variants. There was a channel defense variant, which utilized a powerful searchlight and a machine gun to illuminate targets in the British Channel at night. There were several dozer variants, infantry support variants with a Royal Ordnance quickfire 3-inch howitzer, which would be indicated by an CS in the designation, so for example Matilda 2 Mk2 CS, a variant with a demolition charge of 600 pounds called a Carrot, and the Matilda Hedgehog, which utilized a 152mm artillery system on the engine deck, and especially the mine-clearing devices called Baron and Scorpion. Though these vehicles weren't without flaws, the early models needed an operator for the device, which would be stored in a semi-armored can on the side of the vehicle. With the African sun burning down from top and a hot-running engine inside, this created some truly horrible conditions. And last but not least, the Australians would develop the Frog and Murray flamethrower variants, which came in handy in the Asian theater. Now to my final conclusion. First off to the Matilda 1. The Matilda 1 is truly a bad tank. She's maybe one of the better tankettes of the Second World War, but this is a family of vehicles that were really outdated by the time of World War II. And they are in large troubles once they run into really anything that has an anti-tank gun. While their good armor maybe protect them from those for a while, with the machine guns they don't really have anything to throw against them. The Matilda 2, however, sits in a little bit of a different light. While there were indeed issues, the problems with mass production that would ultimately seal the fate of the vehicle being one of them, the speed not being the best, and the armament also leaving some space for improvements, I would still conclude the Matilda 2 to probably be one of the best heavy tanks in early World War II. The armor was very good, and the slow speed was at least adequate for the task it was assigned for. Support infantry for a breakthrough, and after that the cruiser tanks can take over. While you may say this is a very specific field of usage or a very special window of usage, that applies for the large majority of heavy tanks deployed in the Second World War, or generally ever. And so I don't think this is really fair to the vehicle. In comparison to the other combatants in the Second World War, the Matilda 1 is a decent vehicle, and it managed to stay relevant for the majority of the conflict. In fact, even once it was outdated, it was at least able to be used as an engineering vehicle in a number of ways. So my final statement is going to be a very decent, and if not the best, heavy tank for the early part of World War II. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have anything to contribute to the conversation, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below. I would be very thankful for any constructive criticism, and I hope I see you on the next part. Until then, stay safe and have a nice day.